Hey guys, it's Silver again, and this is my next podcast. Today I'm going to talk about the dangers of the typical belief system. Now, everybody wants to believe that, having a typical belief system has a place in the world, that we need it, and so on and so forth. But the truth of the matter is that we all could live very diversely. And the things that we actually need to agree on aren't things that necessarily revolve around psychological or spiritual or mental or any kind of belief systems as far as that goes. Like, let's say, we were to build a city and we needed a water cistern and everybody needed to work together and we needed it to be a certain way in the end. Well, that's one thing. But when we're talking about the way that we each live our lives outside of those simplistic survival things that we all need to share, most things can be quite diversified, and it is all right. Everybody is a lot of people are so afraid of this these days, but it's actually true that human beings are a very diverse species and that we are all evolving possibly into becoming different subspecies, as happens with beings that are extremely evolved, and especially since we've reached the level of sentient, it allows us to diversify in many different directions. Now, I'm not going to go through and define what each and every single one of these words means, but I'll do a somewhat good job. It feels like people are more focused on not understanding than they are understanding these days. They hear a word, they, maybe become triggered in some way about what their definition means or how, they don't want to use that word. And this is one of the typical things that's really limiting people from being able to connect and communicate, is that it has become more important to interrupt somebody who is attempting to share a thought process with someone else and then nitpick a word usage in the middle of it, which interferes with their ability to share that wavelength and doesn't allow them to feel acknowledged. And this is one of the typical things that I've noticed. People are carrying around all these beliefs and they're not really listening anymore. And that's one of the things that really isn't okay. It's at that point, you're just living in your own world, and you're not really connecting to other people unless people already have the exact same thought processes and definitions as you. And then you're going to end up just surrounding yourself with people that have the same thought processes, beliefs as you, which makes you close your mind and become comfortable, as opposed to thought processes that expand your mind to being able to include other people that are different from you and live in harmony with them. So in the end, in a lot of these typical thought processes that are going around that have even made their way into subculture and spiritual communities at this point, there's a unification that's happening that is exiling diverse people. And diverse people are going to be more of the population than we really think. We know that they are at least 25% of the population of people that need to have diverse lifestyles, but in fact, it is not necessary for any amount of the population to have a typical mindset about things. As I was saying before, it is okay for people to have different thoughts, different feelings, different ideas. Beliefs and opinions are something that I don't really think about too much, because if it's something that is just an opinion or a belief in the way that I define it, that means that it's things that you haven't actually proven using the scientific method in conclusion in your reality of your experience. If you have actually concluded something using the scientific method in your life, in your experience, that thing becomes a truth. And it's not just a truth for just you. If it's something that you have proven actually does function on more than a psychological or thought process level, then if it worked, it worked. And if it doesn't work for somebody else and it works for you, that doesn't mean that it only exists in your reality. You energetically got something to work, therefore it functions. universally. Therefore, it is a truth. It could function for somebody else if they were able to go through the process that you went through the way that you did, but maybe they can't because of limitations that they have or different ways that they live their life, and that's okay. But the point of the matter is I'm seeing a lot of people assimilating mostly what are opinions and beliefs into the ideals of their lifestyle system that don't include the diversity of the people around them, but close them off to the diversity of the people around them. For instance, like I was saying earlier, a lot of people are carrying around some thought process so much that they hear a word and they stop listening and just want to nitpick the word or the idea that you have instead of listening to the entire wavelength of the flow of the entire idea. They decontextualize it into small pieces, which then makes it not make any sense, makes them not understand it, and then they care more about responding to what words you used or what piece of the context that they were listening to, instead of listening to the entire flow of the wavelength, where it starts, where it goes through, and where it ends. They allow themselves to become distracted with some, idealistic opinion or belief system that they have that allows them to close their mind from being able to listen to the entirety of that person's thought process, experience, or feeling. And this is not beneficial for expanding our minds to encompass the diversity of the world, because in truth, human beings are inherently diverse creatures. And even if people want to focus on making us into pack animals in a more primitive sense, in which people are going to hive together on thoughts and feelings and all of these things, we have to remember the dangers of those things have always been prevalent throughout history, and that diversity and allowing diversity, accepting diversity, and expanding to diversity are the things that keeps our mind open and then protects us from things like turning against each other, from brainwashing. We have to be careful about what we're thinking and what we're assimilating into our thought process. Just because somebody that we respect has a thought or a feeling, that doesn't mean we have to assimilate it. It's more important that when we're listening to each other, that we're not trying to assimilate each other's thoughts and feelings into our own, as much as we're just trying to understand them from the perspective where they're coming from, if we are going to be giving each other true safe space and listening, compassionate safe space, true acknowledgement and embrace. But so often now I'm seeing people unable to connect on a true, compassionate, deep, kind human level because of these limitations that, like I said, are now even seeping their way in through what communities that would call themselves spiritual or energetically aware, intelligent, or even counterculture. The unification of the uniformity that's beginning to happen with the typical mindset is that there's a simple typical mindset that if everybody assimilates it, it makes it easier for the individual to function. And that's why it is an individual belief system. Now, like I said, for me, I don't even deal with in beliefs and opinions. I deal with things that have been scientifically proven in my reality, either through my experience or through the experience of someone else, or in a way that I can see the entirety of how that functions, to the point where I can prove to myself that it actually does function, more than just through hearsay. Whether or not those people are claimed for having knowledge or not, does it actually function in my mind? Does it actually function in reality? Can I apply it to reality and see how it functions in reality? Can I pick it apart and actually prove down to the level of each piece how it works? And those things are truths. Those things some people call facts, but nothing's altruistic, so I tend to not use the word fact. Now, if you're listening to these things and my definitions for these words, and you're beginning to understand how I think, then you will be able to understand this podcast. If something I've said has already been a word that you don't want me to use, that you would like me to have a different thought or feeling about, or my thought process you think needs to shift, or you have some belief or ideal that keeps you from being able to listen to this, then I'm sorry that you are being closed-minded. You need to open yourself up by relaxing and releasing your beliefs and your opinions and just listen, because I would do that for you. Okay? And that's what we all need, is that compassionate connection to realize that language is limiting. Okay? We have different definitions for different words, and we're allowed to keep those different definitions for different words. We're allowed to think and feel different things, and any belief system that we're carrying into the world that affects our intercommunication and connection with other beings should be something that is allowing us to expand ourselves to include the people around us and understand their perspectives that are going to be completely different from ours, or maybe slightly similar to ours, or maybe very similar to ours, and not allow ourselves to push people away because they have different belief systems that are not affecting us in any other way than just conversationally. Because if someone else is living their own life and you can make that affect you in a philosophical manner, then you're not inclusive. So it's like the way someone talks bothers you, unless that person's actually having neurological abusive tendencies, like, yelling, cutting you off, talking over you, and not allowing you to flow. Can you find the bridge where you are figuring out how this person's mind works and what their definitions are and how they think? And are you operating within that while conversating to them? And are they also adapting in a reciprocation to understanding how you think and how you feel, how you see things, what your definitions are? And are you building a communicative bridge that includes the expansion of the multiverse of multiple people's minds to be able to accept the diversity in an expansion way of thinking, as opposed to a narrowed down form of thinking where people are herding together in cliques of people that think and feel and believe and have ideals that are the same as them, so that they don't have to go outside of their comfort zone of their mode of communication, or you do different usage of words or different definitions or different flows of the way things work, so that you can just be comfortable and uniform, push everyone away that's different from you, close your mind, and then inevitably turn away from the people that are diverse, push them away and exile them, which is pushing a whole bunch of people in the corner to basically have to die. Yes, and that's happening. People are struggling, suffering, and dying because they're getting exiled from communities constantly, because of this typical belief system that I'm here to talk about today. Now, I am 40 years old and I have 170 IQ. I'm not trying to be egotistical, and I definitely, I in a way, I feel like it's a curse, because I have a difficult time connecting to most people, because I have spent my entire life studying psychology, neurology, philosophy, symbolism, language, ancient methods of communication, tribal connection, healing, all of these things that have to do with interconnection between people and the way that we perceive reality, in order to try to expand my vocabulary and my ability to connect to people in a way that allows me to be able to bring people to relief, give people their neurological needs, to be able to help reactivate their nervous system and their thinking, to be able to give people sharper thinking, to be able to be embraced and understood, and all these human neurological needs that we have, because our nerves, the one thing that we do all have in common is that our nervous systems all function in basically the same way. It's just that when they say some people have stronger nervous systems, it's just that those people maybe have not gone through some of the same experiences that have caused them to be in the ways that these other people are that are called more sensitive, and sensitive is seen as weakness when it is not. Sensitive is a different type of strength. It's just, and that's when it comes down to the typical belief system. These people are called sensitive, and those people are considered weaker. These people are less sensitive, and they're considered stronger. Well, the reason why that is because the people that are considered stronger, that have quote unquote less sensitive nervous systems, are going to be less diverse. They're going to be more able to adapt into a typical mindset. And unfortunately, a big part of what's going on in society right now is the more pleasant person is considered the better person. And that's absolutely not the case. People who are truly intelligent and people who are contributing to the innovation of this world, who are diverse, are going to be the kind of people that bring challenge into your life conversationally and philosophically. The people who just soothe and make you feel comfortable and agree with everything that you are saying, those people aren't challenging you. Those people are not those people are seen often as the people that should be kept close. People want to be comfortable. They don't want to be challenged. They don't want to have to diversify their mindset. And in that closing their mind as you get older, it actually limits your nervous system from being able to expand. Excuse me. It limits your nervous system from being able to expand as you age. So it's important to actually value the philosophical challenges that come into your life, and to be able to expand your mind to being able to think about things from different perspectives and different definitions. And even if it doesn't change how you think and how you function in your life, you can still allow yourself to understand someone else's perspective, accept them into your reality, and value the challenges that they will continuously bring when they're different perspective. And that is an open-minded person. Now, there's so many problems with this that I don't even know where to start. But like I was saying, a lot of people, the non-typical people, which is actually about 25% of the population, a higher amount of people than any other minority group, and we're in this, we're going through this political liberal. There's all these liberal people that are like trying to stand up for the minorities, but the minority that is not being stood up for is the diverse people. And the reason why I can say this is true is because even within the minorities of the liberal movement, and there's minorities in the conservative movement too. At this point, none of it really makes any sense. But as far as any of the minorities of ways of thinking that are being stood up for by sociopolitical groups, none of them amount to anywhere as close to the amount of people are diverse people who need acceptance for being different in order to be integrated into society, because adaptation and integration go both ways. So it's like, yes, you need to adapt to the world, but there's also a limit to how much you can adapt, and certain things that you cannot adapt in order to keep other parts of yourself, which are your abilities, your skills, and everything has like everything sort of has things that are attached to it in your psyche, and these things over here might be a little bit more difficult, or might be seen as flaws by certain people, or might create challenge. But if you change those things, it will change other things, and that might be a balance that you need in order to have this skill over here. So there are things that you can't, people don't know people cannot understand the complexity of how those things work with each other unless they actually sit down and explain and connect, which is very rare. So when you want someone to adapt part of themselves, first of all, it's not in your place to do that. You don't know what someone else's lessons are. Pretending that you do know what someone else's lessons are can possibly put you into the realm of causing harm to somebody, all the way to abuse, because it's really not for us to be going out into the world. That is a form of judgment, a form of negative judgment. Now, there is positive judgment, but this is negative judgment, in that you don't know what someone else's lessons are that they need to learn in life. And if you think that you do, then you will start acting and communicating in a way to them that will subconsciously or consciously enforce that lesson upon them, which could be something that actually causes them to attempt to adapt something about themselves that they shouldn't, especially if they have told you that they are not willing to, or think that they don't need to adapt that, or if they've made effort to preserve that part of themselves, and you continue to push communicatively or through action in ways to try to get them to adapt, which, we can't always leave situations. We can't always leave living situations. We can't always leave work situations. We can't always distance ourselves from social situations. So then people end up making adaptations which are harmful for them because of the fact that other people think that they know what those people's lessons are, and they think about it. And if this is a form of judgment, sitting and thinking, oh, well, I think I know what that person needs to learn. That person, needs these certain lessons, and then imbuing that in the way that you communicate and act with them will happen if you have those thoughts, and then it could cause them to adapt in a way that they don't consent to, or is harmful for them. So in the end, it's better for you to just realize you cannot understand the complexity of traits that people have and the balances that they are, and you have no place trying to tell people what their lessons are in most instances. And everything is not altruistic. Every single thing that I'm saying here, you can think of something that makes it not work. And that's because nothing is altruistic, and there's always instances in which things do not work, and there's always another side of the coin. There's always another perspective. And that's why it's really important that people stop communicating in the single-sided way. When I come across somebody that is actually intelligent, they won't just tell me the typical single-sided, individualistic way. They will also be able to tell me the other side of the coin. Okay? And the only reason why I'm not mentioning the other side, well, I am talking about the other sides of the coin here, but the reason why I'm not doing a lot of that double-sided talking about the two different perspectives, and sometimes there's more than two in this talk, is because the typical ways are out of balance. And everybody needs to be living their lives in a way that they're looking at the world and trying to create balance to some extent. So this talk is to try to bring us back to the balance, because I've been accepting of everybody's beliefs. I've been able to expand my mind to different perspectives. People are, for the most part, almost entirely not doing that for me and the other diverse people around me, to the point where we are all becoming more and more exiled over the last few years, to the point where we are not being integrated by our communities enough to even be able to survive. And this is sad, because this is especially happening to people with higher intelligence, because people with higher intelligence are going to be often the ones that have diverse mindsets and lifestyles. So diversity is necessary for evolution and innovation. Now, you could go on forever about the benefits of having a uniform, typical society. It's known. However, there are side effects to attempting to have a utopian perfection in that way. And even if you think you're not trying to have a utopian perfection, that is what the uniform, typical mindset does. And the truth is that we actually do not need to carry typical philosophical mindsets in the world. If everybody wants to get together, like I said, and create something for a community, we can all agree upon building something or something like that. But if everyone has to think the same way in order to be part of a community, that community is a community of oppression. And it doesn't matter how spiritual they are. It doesn't matter what certifications they have from what healing modalities or tribes or psychology or whatever it is. Almost entirely, the communities are functioning in a uniform, oppressive way to some extent. And I understand that sometimes we want to experience a certain idealistic belief system or philosophical belief system in order to go through a ritualistic or ceremonial mindset or a philosophical or psychological transformation that we share in a collective with people. But it can be dangerous as well, because the communities that we should be building, if we want to really include everyone and expand everyone's mind in a way that makes people feel embraced, should be that people are allowed to think and feel and talk differently within that community and have the embrace that they need to have. And those are the communities that I find that are missing. Now, people want to follow. People like to come together and all think, feel, say, and talk all the same way so that they can feel like they are at one. Unfortunately, a lot of times those people are forcing themselves or putting on, and everyone may not be getting the benefit out of the situation. It's also dangerous to be feeling like you're getting a benefit out of conforming and oppressing yourself into a uniform mindset, which if you're forcing yourself into it at all, or if you're changing yourself into it all at all, that can be dangerous, because a big part of what people are not taking into account these days is brainwashing. Now, brainwashing is something that every single human being on earth is capable of getting brainwashed. Every single human on earth is capable of brainwashing another. There's nobody who has a quote unquote strong enough mindset or nervous system to not get brainwashed. It is possible for anyone. And it especially becomes dangerous when we're talking about media. There's a lot of brainwashing on media. And what I'm noticing is that, on the internet and media, almost all of the things that people are talking about are one-sided, individualistic, single perspective that doesn't include diverse perspectives and focuses on only one thing, and then therefore pushes away the other side of the coin. And it's really sad, because it's like if you're sitting and watching all these videos, excuse me, my alarm's going off. If you're sitting and watching all these videos and then talking to all these other people that have this mindset, that's a form of brainwashing. It's a programming, it's a conditioning, and that's true. And if you're going and sitting in front of a screen with a bunch of words on it, and it doesn't matter how ancient or old or renowned or anything something is, that's also a form of brainwashing. If you're sitting in a circle with a bunch of people and forced to conform to a certain set of thinking, feeling, talking, and acting, after a few hours, that will have a programming and conditioning effect on you. And it's not to say that all those things are negative, because there can be positive benefits to allowing yourself to be conditioned in a certain way. But we have to be careful about it, and we have to admit to ourselves that we are surrendering ourselves to being conditioned in these ways. And it can especially be dangerous when we're dealing with the spiritual and shamanic communities, because at that point we're talking about etheric and energetic things that may not necessarily be able to be tangibly scientifically proven, or maybe they can to some certain extent. And even when we're dealing with science, there's bias science, so there, just about anything can be proved scientifically or disproven scientifically, if we're talking about bias science. So we have to be really, really careful, with how we're allowing ourselves to change. And the main thing that I want people to ask, because I want people to ask, is the conditioning that you're putting yourself through in the community or in your individual self, is it expanding you to accept other people's diverse ways of thinking, feeling, definitions for words, perspectives? Is it allowing you to become a better listener that can embrace other people's wavelengths? Or is it closing you off to decontextualizing when you're listening, waiting to say what you have to say about your belief and ideal, cutting someone off, talking over them, not really listening, acknowledging, not connecting in a human, compassionate way, judging them for the words that they use and the definitions that they have and beliefs that they have, pushing them away and not wanting to connect with them as much, due to them having a diverse mindset? And are you more comfortable being around people that have a more uniform mindset to you, so that you can just simply agree on definitions and thoughts, feelings, words, and ideals, and so that you can be inside your comfort zone, which is actually narrowing in your perspective as opposed to expanding and opening your mind. Which one of those things is the conditioning that you are putting yourself through and you are going through in your community doing? Is it expanding or is it narrowing? And and if you think it's expanding, are you forcing yourself to believe it's expanding because it's expanding for you? You're meeting people, more things are happening in your life, you have more opportunities, but is it expanding for everyone? Is it expanding for everyone around you, everyone you're connected to? Is it expanding for including more of the suffering and struggling people in the world that could be thriving if they were integrated into a community? Or is it just something that just works for you, and only what works for you matters to such a level that even though we're all allowed to each have our own diverse mindsets and perspectives, are you accepting other people's and keeping them close to you in your life so that you can continue to have an ever expanding perspective of definition, of how we perceive this world on long wavelengths that can't be decontextualized, because everything is a thought process. Our mind is full of synapses that are shaped like trees. And in order to fully understand somebody, you couldn't just cut one leaf off that tree and say, oh, I know that tree. You can't go down halfway the tree and cut a tiny branch off and say, you know the tree. The way that the entire tree functions is the important part when getting to know an individual. You need to understand that there are whole wavelengths of thought process and experience that you have to flow through to really understand someone else's perspective. And that inevitably, we need to have people in our life that we respect. And you don't respect someone if you're constantly thinking, I don't like that word, I don't like that thought process, I don't like that concept, I don't believe that's true, I would like to disagree. Because in the fact of the matter is that, if we're talking about someone's own perspective, there's nothing to disagree about. If you respect that person, that was their experience, that's what happened, that's how it works for them. You don't have to conform to it. It's just their perspective. There's nothing to disagree with. And that's what's really interesting, is that it feels like so many people are living in this collective hive mind where they think that, it's like, oh, that's not it, that doesn't work. It's like, why? That's them. They say it works for them. it works. If the way that you are is different and that works for you, that works too. Can't we accept each other and see each other's different perspectives? Why are we trying to project and mirror everything on each other? It's as if all of communication between the typical population has become gaslighting. It has, and and people, there is a such thing as narcissistic, and whatever you want to call it, it's an individualistic, closed-minded, selfish perspective that doesn't include being able to expand to include other people's perspectives, because people become offended, they become uncomfortable, they become challenged, and they just, they would rather just stay in their comfort zone and not even have to communicate in a way that expands our mind to be able to even understanding another person's perspective, when understanding the other person's perspective doesn't ask you to change yourself. You don't have to change how you act, how you think, how you feel, how you live, your beliefs. You don't have to change any of that to embrace and accept someone else's perspective. But the question is, does someone have to change themselves, the way they think, feel, and all that stuff, in order to see your perspective? Because if that's true, then you are closed-minded and you are oppressing people with your belief system. You're narrowing your scope. You're disconnecting yourself from people. You're creating misunderstanding as opposed to understanding. We need to try to understand one another. This is very, very important. We need to go out of our way to build bridges of communication that realize that language is extremely limiting, and allow ourselves to go through all of these realms of experience and philosophy and definition until we can find the ability to understand someone else's perspective and embrace that perspective is true and it is real, it makes sense and it functions, and there you respect it from there, and you respect the person, and there's a connection. And that doesn't mean that you have to change yourself. If you think that it means that you have to change yourself, then you do need to change yourself, just in the way that you need to be able to open yourself to seeing other people's perspectives, while realizing that you don't actually have to change yourself to do that. The only change that might need to be made is the realization that everything, even though we are all mirrors and projections to some extent, we are not exact mirrors and projections, because even within a mirror, everything is slightly different. And we are all slightly to extremely different from each other. That mirror might even have a crack in it. It might even be completely shattered. We could be that different from each other. And what matters is that we still can see through the tiny little facets of that mirror to realize that there is truth in every perspective, experience of someone that we respect. Otherwise, we cannot claim to respect them. So, I want to ask you again, is the way that you live your life and the way that you function philosophically in your life, does it allow you to hear a completely different perspective from yourself that you can accept and realize means that you don't have to change yourself and that it actually functions? Can you do that? This is what you have to be able to do to be a truly open-minded person that accepts diversity in your world. Now, if you want to be someone that doesn't accept diversity in the world and inevitably oppresses and exiles people by expecting a uniform belief system, you better think about that narrowing down that you're doing, because you're turning away from people, you're not allowing yourself to acknowledge and embrace people, and you're just seeking the comfortable, and all of these things are unhealthy, not just for you, but for the community and entirely for human beings in general. There are ways of existing that work for everybody. And then there's the typical mindset that only works for 75% of the population. Now, everybody being able to be different and accept everybody else's different definitions and perspectives, and having the respect that I've been talking about through this entire talk, that includes everybody. The typical perspective only includes 75% of the people, and the other 25% are exiled over here to suffer and struggle and not be able to thrive and even die. And is it worth it? Is it worth it to have this illusion of this uniformity that everybody thinks that they can function underneath? Historically, philosophically, psychologically, it doesn't pan out in the end, because there will always be diversity and evolution and adaptation. And if that piece always gets exiled out because people are seeking the uniformity of perspectives, then inevitably the species puts itself into extinction through a form of uniform or singularity. And that's true, and that's what happened to like the trilobites. And we need to be careful that we're not leading to that. And I'm sure some people are laughing right now thinking that that doesn't have anything to do with it. It does. So it's really important that you understand that when you're watching media or going to ceremonies or hanging out in communities, that you are going through a form of conditioning, and that you are aware to whether that conditioning is expanding you to include diverse perspectives or narrowing you down to a comfort zone, and that the narrowing in is healthy, the expanding is unhealthy, and to not lie to yourself about what those things are. Because another thing that I really wanted to address today, it's difficult for me to say this because it's going to upset some people, but there are a lot of ceremonial plant medicine, quote unquote tribal things happening in our country now and all over the world, where people are paying money and becoming part of communities to learn from people who have, received the, training of a quote unquote shaman and all of these things, which this stuff may be valid and it may not be valid. Sometimes they're doing it for money. Sometimes they've conformed to beliefs that are narrowing. We have to be careful. You can't fully subscribe to anything or fully believe anyone, or you're conforming and closing your mind. You can believe, oh, that thing works. Oh, that seems to have worked. I'll try that out. But the moment that you completely surrender yourself to another person or community or belief system or something like that, you have to be careful about what it is that you're assimilating, always questioning. And the moment that you stop questioning, unless we're talking about just for a short period of time, like it's good to go into a different perspective universe for a short period of time, to use ritual and ceremony to release your beliefs and ideals, thoughts, and all those kind of things in order to be able to experience something that might possibly have a positive transformation for you to see different perspectives. It's good to do those things for short periods of time. However, you have to always keep your discernment in that all of the things that you think and feel during that time may not be real, may not be valid, may not be true, may need to be deciphered in a different way, or may need to be released. And the sharing of that collective tribal connection can be very important. However, it's also important that everything is taken with a grain of salt, so to speak, like I said, in the discernment of realizing that, you need to contemplate things continuously over time and see if they're actually expanding you or narrowing in or your perspectives. So, the use of mind-altering substances is a prevalent means of brainwashing. So we have to be really careful about that too, because anytime that we're using mind-altering substances and then surrendering our mindset to it could just be a conversation with a friend. We have to be careful because we're conditioning ourselves at that time heavily. And we have to make sure that that conditioning is something that we take with a grain of salt, with discernment, that we contemplate later to see if it's actually expanding us to include the diversity of the people, situations, and beings around us, to include the 100% of the population as opposed to 75%. So, I hope that this talk about this talk about diversity will really open some people's minds. And that's it for now. And the Silver over and out.